The thing that we have realized is it's always going to be a people business. Now, technology is going to certainly help enable them to be superhuman, but this is always going to be a people business. And so, in so much that we make our people better because we're selling our people's time essentially to the public. When we make their time worth more money, then we make more money.
Hello, professional property managers. Andrew Smallwood here. I'm joined by Matthew Whitaker from Evernest and Shim from the Second Nature team, our Chief People Officer. And we wanted to take a chance to record live a quick episode while we're here at Broker Owner to pull out some wisdom from Matt and Shim, who have been longtime NARPM educators. I guess Shim more recently, a NARPM educator, joined the stage, and talking about not just property management, but really people management and how to hire a great team, retain a great team, lead a great team to success and handle people management challenges. So for those that don't know you though, Matt, would you mind just introducing yourself and give a little of your background, please?
Yeah, my name is Matthew Whitaker. I'm the CEO at Evernest. I founded Evernest about 13 years ago and have really been focused on growing it for the last 10 years. And Evernest manages about 14,000 homes. We're in 19 different states and 20 plus markets. And we have about, for this podcast, we have about 400 team members.
Yeah. Wow. And can you say where those team members are located?
Yeah, they're all over the US. So we have people in a number of different states. We have a number of people working remotely. We obviously have a number of boots on the ground in the markets that we manage. And then we also have team members in Mexico and the Philippines. You know, they're full-time equivalents, but they're independent contractors.
Very good. All right. And Shim, can you give a little background on yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Shim Markette. I'm based out of Boston, Mass. I've been with Second Nature as their Chief People Officer for about a year and a half now. Previous to Second Nature, I worked at a company called Evercoat where I led people operations, joined there as the 40th employee, exited 8.5 years later when we were about 750 people as a public company. It was a wild ride, and I'm really have had a great first year and a half with Second Nature. We have 165 employees, also full remote across maybe 35, 36 states, and have been really fortunate to come in and be welcomed into an amazing culture that was already built. And my job has just primarily been to continue to keep it going.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, excited to have this conversation. And Matt, I'd love to start with you because a question we hear a lot from property managers at a certain stage is making their first hire or first couple of hires. Maybe they have a couple members of the team and trying to decide which the next one. How do you, if you rewind back, could you kind of like tell us a story of some of the first hires or, that you made and how you guys went about that decision and how you think about it now?
I think one of the things we got right is the fact that we hired well really early. And I played a big role in that. My guess is I had a big say-so in the first 50 to 100 people that we hired. Mm-hmm. What I have found is that those first people are so important. If you think about it, if it's your first hire, it's 50% of your company. Or if it's your 10th hire, it's still 10% of your company. That's just a big number for a small business. So you need people that are making a huge impact. But one of the things that I found was that they were so important that we wanted to create like a system for doing that really early. And so we developed a system for hiring and finding the right team members.
Yeah. And Shim, I think you've helped a number of organizations navigate the next hire, department leaders. So how do you kind of help, people think about making that next hire and identifying how they're going to build the team?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question, Andrew. But I think that some of the things that I encourage hiring managers or leaders in an organization to do is really clearly define what they're looking for and understand, hey, what's the mission of this role? What are the outcomes that this person is going to drive? What are the competencies we need? Does that need to be a specific set of true skill sets, or is it attitudes, behaviors? I loved what you said about really nailing those early hires or even later stage, more senior leaders. They are really going to create the cadence, the way that everyone else works together. So you want to make sure that you're hiring great people. One of my early mentors, one of my bosses, a former CEO, said, every hire you hire should be better than yourself, and really trying to embody that as I move forward.
Yeah. Matt, I'd love to ask And if there's 400 active team members now, I would guess, over a decade plus, it's more than 400 people that you've hired, right? Over that time. What are a couple of the things that you see are like common mistakes or pitfalls that you either learned the hard way or easier way from other people's mistakes that you think are really important for people to keep in mind?
Yeah, to Shim's point, being very clear on what you're hiring is super important. A lot of people will just jump straight into the hiring process and they won't be super clear on, well, what is it? Defining what it is that they're hiring. The second thing I've seen is you need to have a consistent hiring process. I think when we first start out, we don't know the questions to ask, and we kind of like go on this touchy-feely way of hiring people. Does this feel good? Sometimes that's okay because a lot of early employees are referrals from people. But as you start to scale up your organization, you really need to be very consistent because it's really hard to compare candidates unless you have some sort of consistent process. And then again, I love what Shim said and I think about it in terms of like Bezos talks about the bar raiser, right? As you grow your organization, you're going to start with very, very, like when I first started, I was doing a lot of things. I was leasing, I was doing some accounting. I was talking to owners, I was talking to residents. But as you grow an organization, it becomes much more departmental. You need more specialists versus generalists. And I think what happens where a lot of teams will hit the like lid, if you will, is when they're continuing to hire those generalists versus going out and hiring a specialist.
Yeah. Shim, I know you've seen that movie before, kind of moving from athletes who can play all over the field to specific role players who are really good at specific things. How have you kind of helped people work through that transition, in an organization if somebody's doing that?
That's a great question. And I think, again, it kind of goes back to what you're looking for. And as we sort of build out the team, helping people understand where they can have the most impact. I've been in that role where I've been a department of one and then grown that team significantly. I know you've probably been in that role yourself. We've probably all been in that seat as like early stage employees. Sometimes it's hard on us too, right? We love doing a lot of different things, but helping people understand, hey, here's where you have the most impact. Here's where you can have the most value. And then also kind of honoring, hey, we brought in these new folks, these specialists. We want to make sure that they have the opportunity to excel and understanding like, here's where the give and take is. Let's make sure people have the opportunity to try things on their own without maybe, our baggage that we've brought from the early years. So I think it's just coaching. I think it's a conversation. I think it's also talking to those new hires, right? Those specialists who are coming in where there have been a lot of general athletes and kind of saying like, hey, here is what some of the challenges are going to be in this role. And here's what we want you to think about. And here's how we want you to give us feedback as we're bringing people in because, hey, maybe I've done 12 different things, but I don't actually know how to do, like, I'm not a payroll specialist or I'm not a compliance specialist or I'm not these things. And I'm hiring you to help drive me forward on that.
I think people underestimate too the switch from property management to people management. To get this business from 0 to 1, you're really focused on how do I, help clients? How do I lease houses? And you're like a doer. And then like to get this business to the next level, you have to kind of like switch into more of a people focused organization. And so like my day 10 years ago is nowhere near what my day is today. My days are mostly focused on people, as I'm sure a lot of leaders around here are. And so you really have to decide. What I get back to is to be very intentional about what type of organization you want. I think there's going to be a future for somebody that just wants to manage 200 to 400 homes and be a great property manager, kind of like a self-employed high income earner. But if you're going to grow an organization, which will take 400, thousands of people, then you're going to have to be intentional about the switch from, E-Myth calls it the technician to the business owner. And that is a big shift. Like there is, other than the fact that I can teach somebody how to manage properties, there is nothing intuitive that I learned back here that I can apply necessarily today.
Matthew, can you like double click on that for a second and like maybe share a little bit of your own story? Because like to me, that's a big shift, not just in what you're doing, but it seems like there's that kind of identity shift that has to take place of how you see yourself as leader and how you view, your organization and your role in it.
So I think of this in really 4 stages. And one of the cool things is I said I didn't learn anything, but actually I went down the path, and then now I'm able to teach it to people that are running markets or regionals that are running, multiple markets. But I really think in property management, there's kind of 4 stages of growth. The first one is just the technician that's doing everything, that's focused on, again, leasing houses. At about 300 to 400 homes, which ironically, that's where most property managers get stuck in this like flip from property manager to people manager, where you're managing a small group of people. And that flip is you start to not know all the owners, and you start to not know everything that's going on. And then it goes through another metamorphosis, which is leadership. So you're starting to lead managers. I think of this in the way when we started to have 3 or 4 markets, my job became more about leading the managers of those markets. And then now it's getting to the corporate team. Now I'm leading leaders that are leading managers, or leading leaders that are leading leaders that are leading managers. And so, you're going to go through these specific stages, and there's just different skill sets that are required. To give you an example, to go from 300 or 400 homes to 1,000 homes, one of the skill sets is going to require is being able to, give constructive feedback to people, being able to, do one-to-ones and help coach somebody along. You become sort of like a player coach in that instance. And so those are those specific stages we saw, and now we're just literally teaching those to our organization as we grow.
I want to chime in on one thing that you said, which is delegation, especially when we're a team of 1 or a team of 2, feels so incredibly painful, right? Because we know how to do things so well, and it's so easy for me to do this process. And now I've got to teach this person who's never done it before, and I've got to invest all this time and energy and watch them do it and watch them fail and watch them want to try it differently. And sometimes it's both a little bit of like, I'm losing the power, right? I'm letting them try new things, but also I feel like I'm wasting time. But you're investing that time and energy in the long term. You have to think about the long-term goal. I myself have been challenged with delegation over time, but I've also seen that like when I kind of just let go a little bit and believe and trust the person that I've carefully hired through a structured, thoughtful interview process, the results are sort of like endless, and you truly kind of multiply the impact of your team members.
When I was the biggest lid on my team was when I was trying to delegate, not things I was bad at, like accounting. It was when I was starting to delegate things I was good at. And like property management, I was a great property manager. And so, because I know exactly what that owner needs, I know what the right response is. To your point, it's really hard to allow somebody to make that mistake or send that email to that owner without coaching them ahead of and making sure that it goes really well. But if you're going to grow an organization, you're going to have to be willing. I call myself sometimes the chief apology officer. You have to be willing to allow people to fail and then apologize later and allow them to learn. The frustrating thing when you only have 1 or 2 people is you train them and then they leave, right? And then you lose, a third of your whole organization that you spent all this time training. Frankly, it's just and that's where people start to come back down to something, a size that they can manage. But, again, it's about being intentional. Do you want that big business? Do you want to manage, hundreds of people or thousands of people? Or do you want to just have something that you can control and I call it the genius with the 1,000 helpers. Do you want to be that self-employed person? And again, like there's no wrong answer to that. It's only a right answer for somebody. But the difference is people management. That's the big difference between those two businesses.
I want to shift a little bit. And we talked a lot about hiring and how you're seeing yourself, your role, and what stage the business is up to this point. I want to talk a little bit about, actually like leading and managing the existing team. Like you just talked about the challenges of losing an employee, especially an early employee. And one thing I heard, I can't remember who said this, so maybe in the post show notes, Alec will help me get the credit for who we should link in here. But it was like the opposite of quitting is not retention. The opposite of quitting is like rededication, if that makes sense. Of, hey, not just sticking around, right? But multiple leaders proactively leading, engaged, doing their best work, growing as an individual and growing the organization towards its goals. And I'd love to talk about, and hear from you a couple things you've seen of just engaging employees and developing a culture where people are really bringing their best selves to work, doing their best work, and supporting that as a leader and manager. And what advice you'd offer?
So we're super passionate about this. I mean, one of the great things, it's our core focus if anybody follows EOS, but one of the thing that we have realized is it's always going to be a people business. Now, technology is going to certainly help enable them to be superhuman, but this is always going to be a people business. And so in so much that we make our people better because we're selling our people's time essentially to the public. When we make their time worth more money, then we make more money. And so it's really a virtuous cycle in that, like, I have a vested interest in making my team better. I actually enjoy doing that. That's one of our passions. Spencer Sutton and I talk a lot about it. And we have like internal, what we call 250K meetings where we're doing leadership development and personal development. But it's also very helpful to the business in that, again, every incremental step I can take somebody along to make them better at professional things like sending emails or having phone calls or conflict resolution, then that makes Evernest better. And that's one of the things that I'm so passionate about growing a team is because of that virtuous cycle. And so, we remain excited about it even today and excited about reading books and teaching our team and bringing them along in our careers. And one of the things we say at Evernest is, we don't want people falling out the bottom. We want them shooting out the top. And if we can't grow the organization fast enough to keep people, then we want them to go on to do great things. And some people, we call it a tour of duty, which we borrowed from Reid Hoffman's book, one of his books, and that some people are just at Evernest for a tour of duty. And that's okay. Like we actually just lost our chief people officer and he's going on to do something else. And that's fine. We're excited about that. We hope that he learned something while he was at Evernest, but the last thing we want is to not train them and then fall off the bottom. That's just, that creates the negative feedback loop that is just not positive for any company.
Yeah. Yeah. Shim.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to lose people in this business, right? I mean, ideally we sort of control that narrative, right? And we make sure that we're able to keep the people that we're excited to keep here and that they're engaged. Sometimes, we just lost somebody as well. They went off to start their own business, right?
Yep.
They got funding, and it's like, we're so happy for that person. We want them to be successful. We hope that they take what they learned with us, the entrepreneurial spirit, and go start something on their own. Like, that's a great story for that person. But for the folks here, right, we want to make sure that they're engaged. We want to make sure that they understand our business, that they understand their impact of our work. That's something that I think our CEO Thad and Andrew and the entire executive team does a great job at, right? Really making sure that everyone knows, hey, here's what the mission at Second Nature is. Here's what our objectives are. And here's how your work ties to it, right? Here's how your work directly impacts the customer, which impacts our success. What else? I think that feedback is a huge part of that. Learning and development is a huge part of that. Being able to try new things. We're at this, in a smaller team, you have this great opportunity to sort of go to your team and say, what do you want to learn? What do you want to grow into? What do you want exposure to? What do you want to sit in on, right? And being able to sort of take those folks along for the ride to grow their careers. And we'd love to keep people for 10, 15 years, but, if we can keep them for 5 and then they go on, the greatest mark of my success will be, hey, how many folks did I hire who then went on to be directors of people? And I can only have so many directors of people at one time, especially in a team of 150 people. So, you want people to come work for you and know that, hey, this is going to grow my career. This is going to 10x my career. And whether it's at Second Nature or somewhere else, I'm going to learn a ton and I'm going to be, a raving fan, right? I'm going to go back to other people I meet and say, hey, you should apply at Second Nature and sending great talent forward. And it's sort of like this referral flywheel too.
I think there's a natural distrust, and maybe it was created in the industrial age where employees don't trust, employers. Mm-hmm. And if you can break down that and develop trust with your team members, what you'll find is that team members don't give you 2 weeks notice and then leave you kind of like high and dry. They'll give you 2 months notice, and you can help work their way out of the organization in a super healthy way and allow you the time to prepare for them to be gone. And so one of the things that's been really important to us is just to be hyper focused on, let's develop trust. Let's pour into our people, develop trust, and also have those hard conversations to say, hey, you can come to me if you're not enjoying your job, that's okay. Frankly, I don't enjoy my job all the time. And so it may not be that the job's wrong. Maybe it's just a hard time and we can get through it together. Maybe you're having some personal issues, but maybe you've decided that, working at Evernest is not the right thing for you. That's okay. I'd rather start that conversation months in advance. We're not going to fire somebody if they're having, because what they need to know is that the leaders have those types of challenges too. We're not going to fire somebody if they decide to think about something else, but we need to have those healthy conversations because it's just healthier for the organization. It allows them, I've been the biggest champion for somebody getting their next job. I mean, what a referral from your current boss, hey, we can't keep this person excited. They're a fantastic team member and we want them to go be successful at your company. I mean, that's just a great reference.
Yeah, something you both have talked about or mentioned a couple times throughout is talking about constructive feedback and the importance of that in developing people. And I think property managers are used to being confronted with difficult situations, whether it's with clients, residents, people on their team. And so I'd love to hear, and maybe Shim, I'll start with you because I know one thing we like about bringing Shim to an event like this is I'll post on LinkedIn, hey, our chief people officer is here. She's a sounding board for me all the time. She helps me with these conversations. She's speaking at this time, but she'll be available this time if a couple of you want to talk to her. And
doing therapy sessions.
And Shim graciously has met with a number of people and just talked through a conversation with them. And I know they followed up with me and said how valuable that was. I'd love, Shim, for you to talk about what are a couple challenging conversations that you see people managers and leaders often find themselves confronted with, and what have you found has been helpful in navigating those conversations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just yesterday, I was talking with a couple of property managers who were telling me about a couple employees I have that they're having challenges, right? And one employee said, hey, I think this person really isn't cutting it. I think maybe I'm overpaying them. Maybe I'm paying them too much. Maybe they just don't know what to do. And, the first thing when somebody says hey, this person isn't up to snuff, the first question I ask them is have you told them that? You clearly think that they are not doing it right. Have you told them, here's where I think you're falling short? When somebody comes to me also and says, hey, I think maybe I'm paying this person too much, my answer is you're probably not paying that person too much. You just have the wrong person in the job. You need to figure out if that's the right person for your business. And maybe it's time to exit that person, right? That person also probably isn't happy. I've had to terminate some folks and they've gone on to incredibly successful careers at other companies. And it was just, they were wrong seat, wrong time, right? Sometimes it's us, right? We work with people and I am not everybody's cup of tea. I am deeply, deeply aware of that, right? I have a strong personality, but, making sure that we're giving timely feedback when somebody sort of misses the boat, when a property manager does a lease wrong or, isn't giving a customer the attention they need, grabbing them afterwards and saying, hey, can I give you some feedback on something I noticed? Here's what I saw. Here's the behavior I noticed. Here's what I want you to do next time, right? Giving them the opportunity to change things before things go down this cycle. I remember with one of my first employees, kind of let her do the same thing wrong 15 times. And it got to this point where I hadn't told her because it felt awkward to tell her.
Cool.
But then when I finally had to terminate her, I was so embarrassed because I was hey, I'm terminating you because you've been doing this thing wrong for so long. And I just never told you.
Cool.
I made that mistake very, very early in my career and swore I would never do it again. Yeah.
There's a great story to that point I read, and we see this so clearly in athletes because those of us that love sports, we're hey, that person needs to be coached or that person needs to do that better. But then when we get into organizations, we're scared to give people constructive feedback. But the story goes, this baseball player goes up into the general manager's office and the general manager is not there. And the general manager is the one that puts the team together for the coach. And what he realized is that every teammate of his and him had a binder on the wall. And so since the general manager wasn't there, he's I'm going to get my binder down and look through this. And what he realized is that they were making notes about things can't hit a curveball, slow turning a double play. And when the general manager walked in, he confronted him and he said, why didn't you tell me these things? If you had told me these, I would have, maybe it's a blind spot for me. I would have focused on that and actually, improved it some. Maybe it's a weakness, but I would have improved it some. And the general manager realized, yeah, that's kind of dumb that we've aggregated all this information about people and then we're not even willing to share it with them. And that's the way we're going about growing organizations, or the way people grow organizations is they have a whole binder of things in their mind that they wish they could tell their teammate. And the truth is, that's the most loving thing to do, is to tell the teammate that if they're doing something wrong that may affect their job, the last thing you want to do, to your point, was wait till the end and say, well, you never did this right. You need to have, and the truth is, we're not doing it for them. We're basically saving the uncomfortable conversation that we don't want to have. And so it's really actually a selfish thing that we're just trying to save our own personal comfort for not having that conversation. But I think one of the things that a lot of those conversations, and you've probably experienced this some, Shim, is that they're squishy. Like, this person, I'm paying this person too much, or I don't feel like they're getting the job done. And so what I found that is a helpful tool or a framework that you process people decisions, and EOS has a great one called the People Analyzer. And it basically, goes through a core value fit, which Jim Collins would say, do you want them on the bus? But then it also talks about, like, in that role, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And when you have like this framework to process it, it's like, oh, that person doesn't want it. And then you also have a common language that you can talk about in your organization and say, hey, so-and-so is having a problem wanting it, or so-and-so just isn't getting it. And when you can have that common language, it's much easier to process these people decisions and to have a frank conversation with the person.
I love what you said too about, it's like the loving thing to do is to give the feedback and tell people like where they stand. I had a former teammate who used to say, feedback is always kind, but it's not always nice, right? And brought back to, we have a CFO, his name is Chris Power. And every interaction I have with Chris, he's kind of a vet of the industry, and every conversation he's like, do you have any feedback for me? And then I get to ask him, and maybe, he's been like on the team 6 months, and I know I have a great relationship with Chris. Like, I know he values my opinion, I value his. And he told me at one point, Shim, like, you swear too much. And he's totally right, but nobody had ever told me that. And it totally made me like check what I was doing. And he was like, I think if you sweared less, you would come across like more polished and more authentic. And for whatever reason, right, I'm a woman in an industry that's sometimes male dominated. I'm the only woman sitting at the C-suite. I've sort of put up some of these shields, but I heard it and I felt it. And it was like really, really helpful feedback to hear.
And what's interesting is, like, when we hear that feedback, or even in our daily relationships, and we go out and have relationships with people, friends, the ones you're immediately attracted to are the ones that tell you what you want to hear. But then the ones that you develop these long-term relationships and trust are the ones that you're going to get all of them. Like integrity actually comes from the Greek word that means the whole person. And so there's something attractive, maybe not in the short term, but there's something attractive about somebody that is a whole person, that's always the same person, and always what they're thinking. And I think organizations are like that. They're tough. Some people leave immediately because they just can't stand the constructive feedback. That's okay. But there's something about working in an organization where there's no secrets, where you stand, that feels it creates a lot of trust. And then those are the organizations that get to go really fast, because we're not worried about politicking or what does Andrew think about me or what does Shim think about me. All I need to focus on is get my job done.
And also knowing that when you get that feedback, that person is giving you that feedback because they want you to be the best version of yourself. Right?
That's important.
They're not giving it to me because, hey, I want to make myself seem bigger, or this person seems smaller. But I want Shim or Andrew or Matt, I want everyone to be the best version of themselves. And here's some helpful feedback that I think they can leverage.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I remember we had a board member named Pete Albers who said, the only appropriate response to feedback is thank you. And I'm like, that struck me, because there is oftentimes like a defensiveness in a moment, or trying to be open to that. And hey, what you action on the feedback is still your choice and your decision, right? But trying to receive that, take that as input, and hey, this person's trying to help me see something or do something better, is huge.
Well, as leaders, we also need feedback. One of the things that we run the risk of is our organization doesn't trust us enough to give us that constructive feedback. Graham, who's our president, and a lot of people know Graham around the industry, but he gave me some feedback recently about, he said, you communicate really well verbally, but your writing could use some polishing. And so I didn't get mad. I'm like, that kind of excited me, because now I know, well, what do I need to do? Like, tell me more. And he basically gave me 2 or 3 ways that I could make my writing. All I care about is communicating clearly. I don't have to be like the best writer. I just want to be the person that communicates clearly. And if Graham hadn't had that type of relationship with me, I never would have known.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm not communicating clearly with my team, and that's not solving the problem at all. So, this feedback thing goes both ways.
So before we run out of time, and I want to ask one more question, which is, hey, we covered a lot of ground today, answered a few different questions, but what's one thing that people should know about hiring, leading, building culture, building and managing an organization to success that we haven't talked about yet that you think is important for people to hear? Maybe the most valuable thing that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet. What comes to mind?
I don't mind going first.
Go for it.
I think the bigger you grow your organization, the more you have to think about it. And one of the things, as you become a CEO of 400 or I would imagine 1,000 people have never been there, so I can only assume most of my job is around communication, because I no longer have the oars in my hands, and I'm no longer rowing, but I've got to consistently paint a picture and a vision of where the organization is headed, and also consistently paint a picture of the cadence with which we're going to get there. And so now it's everybody else's job to basically do the rowing, or most people's job to do the rowing. And that's just like it's just a completely different world. I'm constantly thinking about, how can I paint this picture to my team better? How can I paint a picture of where we're headed? How can I use another story to reinforce a point? And so that's the thing that's just struck me, is just how much communicating I do.
Yeah, sure.
I think I would say that lots of people think that the hard part is hiring and finding the right person, but I'll challenge that assumption and say that I think that the hard part is actually onboarding and training those people. That first 30, 60, 90 days is totally critical. That's when we lose great hires. That's when we have the chance to lose out on that investment and some cost that we put into bringing that new hire on. So making sure that we as the hiring managers, we as leaders in the organization are really prioritizing that experience in those early days, and making sure that we're investing in that new hire to make sure that we get that ROI and have a great long-term team member who's going to grow our business.
And fully finish the onboarding. I think once a team member starts giving us 80% return, then we're like, okay, they're,
done.
But you create a true debt in the team when you don't finish the full onboarding
100%.
process.
That's great. So Shim, Matt, thank you guys so much for taking the time today. Everybody, hope you appreciate that. We'd love your feedback. Let us know if you enjoyed this episode. Email us at triplewin@secondnature.com. We'd love to hear what you think. Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of the Triple Win Property Management Podcast. Thank you for pressing play. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration.
The Triple Win Property Management Podcast is proudly produced and distributed by Second Nature, where we believe in a triple win, building winning experiences for your residents, investors, and your teams with the only fully managed resident benefits package. Visit secondnature.com to learn more and talk to an RBP expert in your area.
If you have any questions, comments, or want to weigh in on the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Email triplewin@secondnature.com. That's triplewin@secondnature.com.
Stay connected with us beyond the podcast. Visit our website at secondnature.com to stay updated with upcoming property management events and articles.
And don't forget, you can keep the conversation going in the Triple Win Property Management Facebook group. It's exclusively for property managers.
To receive even more valuable insights and updates, subscribe to our newsletter. You can find the link to that and much more in the show notes.
On behalf of the Triple Win community, this is Laura Mack, thanking you for tuning in.
And on behalf of Second Nature, this is Carol Housel. Check back soon for another exciting episode.
Until then, keep striving for that triple win.